The crew searched for the missing cubs. They were quietly napping in the human's footwear. The alarm shrieked through the corridors of the Celestial Harmony, a multi-species research vessel drifting in the Kepler 442 system. Officer Lyra Benton's boots echoed against the metal floors as she sprinted toward the communal nursery, her heart hammering against her ribcage. "All units, we have a code Amber," the ship's AI announced in its maddeningly calm voice. 3 Valorian cubs, unaccounted for. Initiating lockdown protocols. Lyra cursed under her breath. The Valorians were the newest species to join the Galactic Federation, and their young were precious not just to their kind, but to the entire diplomatic mission. These cubs represented the first generation born in space, symbols of trust between humanity and a species that had every reason to distrust aliens. She burst into the nursery to find Ambassador Threllax, the cub's guardian, his fur standing on end in distress. The Valorian's 6 legs trembled as his crystalline eyes darted around the empty room. "Officer Benton," he chittered, his translator struggling with his panicked frequency. "Rikno, Selma, and Torek, they were here for their afternoon rest cycle." I turned away for merely a moment to adjust the temperature controls, and they vanished. Lyra placed a steady hand on the ambassador's shoulder, feeling the rapid pulse of his alien biology beneath her palm. "We'll find them, sir. Cubs are curious. They probably squeezed through a ventilation shaft or found a storage closet." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. The nursery's security systems showed no breaches. The ventilation grates were intact. It was as if the cubs had simply dematerialized. Within minutes, the entire human contingent mobilized. Captain Rodriguez divided them into search teams, each assigned to different sections of the ship. The Valorians, meanwhile, gathered in the observation deck, their distress pheromones so strong that the life support systems had to increase air circulation. Lyra led her team through the residential quarters, scanning every nook and cranny with thermal imaging. Valorian cubs registered cooler than most species. Their metabolism adapted to their home planet's frigid caves. But the sensors showed nothing. "This doesn't make sense," muttered Ensign Park, checking behind a wall panel. "We've covered 70% of the ship. 3 cubs can't just disappear." Lyra was about to respond when her communicator crackled. "Officer Benton, this is Dr. Okonkwo in medical. I've reviewed the security footage. There's a 30-second gap in the nursery's recording right around the time the cubs went missing." "Sabotage?" Lyra's jaw tightened. "No evidence of tampering. More like a system glitch. But here's the interesting part. The corridor camera shows you walking past the nursery exactly 90 seconds before the cubs disappeared." Lyra's mind raced. She had been returning to her quarters after her shift. She'd passed the nursery, exchanged pleasantries with Ambassador Threllax, and then, her quarters. "Team, converge on my location," she said, already running. "I have a theory." When Lyra palmed open her door, she was greeted by the familiar chaos of her living space. Stacks of physical books, a human eccentricity that baffled most aliens, a half-finished cup of coffee, and her boots. Her large, worn, decidedly human boots that she'd kicked off the moment she'd gotten home. She approached slowly, kneeling beside the footwear. There, barely visible in the dim light, was a tiny tuft of silver fur protruding from the left boot. "Found them," she whispered into her comm, barely containing her relief. By the time Ambassador Threllax arrived with Captain Rodriguez and half the Valorian delegation, Lyra had carefully extracted all 3 cubs from her boots. Rikno had been curled deepest inside the left boot, his small body contorted in a way that seemed impossible for his skeletal structure. Selma and Torek had shared the right boot, tangled together in a ball of fur and contentment. The cubs blinked sleepily, utterly unconcerned by the panic they'd caused. I don't understand," Ambassador Threllax said, his translator conveying his confusion. "Why would they go there? How did they even reach your quarters?" Captain Rodriguez was trying hard not to smile. "Ambassador, how much do you know about human footwear?" "It's protective covering for your bipedal extremities." Lyra gently stroked Rikno's fur, and the cub chirped happily, pressing into her hand. On Earth, small animals, cats, dogs, even rodents are attracted to shoes. They smell like their owners. They're warm from body heat. They're dark and enclosed. They're basically perfect napping spots. But these are Valorian cubs, Threlax protested. We evolved in crystalline caves, not in smelly human boots? Lyra grinned. Maybe not. But mammals across the universe seem to share certain instincts. The cubs probably followed my scent from the nursery. I was the last person who interacted with you before they disappeared. To them, I was familiar, safe, and my quarters were close. Dr. Okonkwo, who'd arrived with a medical scanner, ran it over the cubs. Vitals are perfect. Better than perfect. Actually, their stress hormones are at record lows. Officer Benton's boots apparently provided an ideal sleeping environment. Ambassador Threlax's fur slowly settled as he processed this information. Then, to everyone's surprise, he began to produce a sound that the translator identified as laughter, a chittering, musical sound that filled the cramped quarters. Humans, he said, shaking his head in a gesture he'd learned from his human colleagues. You walk through the stars in metal ships, you split atoms and bend space-time, and yet your footwear still smells so potently biological that it attracts alien children. Captain Rodriguez clapped Lyra on the shoulder. That's humanity for you, Ambassador. We're sophisticated enough to build these ships, but we still appreciate the simple things: comfortable boots, a good nap, the smell of home. Rikno yawned, showing tiny crystalline teeth, and burrowed back into Lyra's boot. I think, Ambassador Threlax said softly, watching his charge with obvious affection, that perhaps our species have more in common than we realized. Our cubs seek warmth and safety, regardless of its source. Perhaps that is the true foundation of the Federation, not our technologies or our treaties, but our shared need for comfort in the vast coldness of space. Lyra carefully placed her boots, cubs, and all into a padded container. Ambassador, with your permission, I think these three just claimed my footwear as their official nap spot. I'll need to requisition new boots. The Valorian's crystalline eyes sparkled with amusement. Permission granted, Officer Benton, and thank you for finding them, and for teaching us that sometimes the best shelter is the most unexpected one. As the crowd dispersed and the lockdown was lifted, Lyra sat on her bunk, watching the cubs sleep peacefully in her boots. Somewhere in the background, she could hear the human crew joking about intergalactic shoe thieves and the galaxy's most dangerous napping spots. She smiled. This was humanity's real gift to the stars, not their weapons or their engines, but their ability to make anywhere feel like home, even to aliens who'd never seen Earth, even if that home was just a pair of well-worn boots at the edge of the galaxy.